CEO Ronald from Creating the Difference. I want to talk to you a little bit about the difference between sanding grit and surface grit. So we'll start with sanding grit. Sanding grit essentially refers to the particle size that's used in a product. You can see here I've got some examples of some different particle sizes over here that would be used in products. Typically, in bowling specifically, the particles that are used typically are made out of aluminum oxide, a silicon carbide, or even a ceramic type material. And when you talk about these sanding grits, we kind of confuse them a lot of times with what that will leave on the surface of the ball. And I want to kind of explain a little bit about the difference between the two. So here's an example, right? So this is a 2000 grit Abralon pad, as you can see, and this is a 2000 grit factory finish on a bowling ball. Now, comparatively, this is the same 2000 grit finish, but it's on a bowling ball that now has been finished with the 2000 grit TruCut, which is different than a standard 2000 grit Abralon. And just the visual of the ball shows you that. It's very, very different, obviously. And the thing of it is, both these balls say 2000 grit. They don't look the same, and you would expect them to roll fairly different. So if you get some spectro data, we're actually able to capture the difference between a 2000 grit Abralon, as you see here, compared to a 2000 grit TruCut, which you see there. I'll kind of go back and forth. You can kind of tell, obviously, there's a pretty big difference in terms of how those balls perform. That's to be expected, too, just given the fact that the Abralon pad does not look nearly as aggressive as the TruCut pad, and it's just not. There ends up being a fairly substantial amount of performance difference, as you can tell, just by using those two pads, even though they both say 2000 grit. Now, so effectively what we're saying here is that the sanding grit doesn't necessarily refer to what it leaves on a bowling ball. And a lot of things can affect the sanding grit: the cutting material used, the resin binder, the backing, the material, the thickness, whether it's used wet or dry, and then pad loading. And these are kind of some examples of all those things that can really, really impact the sanding grit and the sanding grit number, which is why you want to be careful when using sanding grit, because it doesn't really do a great job of telling you what kind of grit you should expect, especially when it comes to the bowling ball. So now we go to surface grit. So surface grit's a little bit different. Surface grit effectively is something that we kind of developed using the ball surface scanner that you can see here. The ball surface scanner is a good way to be able to measure the surface of the bowling ball. It was used in the development of the TruCut sanding pads, and is one of the reasons and one of the ways that we were able to create a pad that would leave the grit that's on the pad as the grit that's on the bowling ball. That's one of the big things that makes the TruCut pads differently. And you can tell when we went to go check and we wanted to scan these pads, we wanted to see what the grit was going to be. And effectively, we use a couple of different methods to be able to get these numbers. The method here primarily was done with the machine to be able to get at least a consistent finish. But you can see with all the pads, effectively where the numbers kind of lie. The 500 was 558, the thousands, 1050, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of where we ended up with our pads. And one of the cool things about this is the material that we're using on TruCut is silicon carbide. Silicon carbide is actually designed for harder materials like plastics and metals. And that's one of the benefits and one of the reasons why we decided to go with the silicon carbide material on the TruCut sanding pads. Like I said, we could have did the aluminum, we could have did ceramic, but we ended up with the silicon carbide because that gave us the best cut and gave us the most consistent finish, because that's the real key here. The key is consistent finish time and time again, which is what you're going to be able to see when you use these pads. The pads last 3 to 4 times longer. I can kind of show you real quickly kind of why that is. You can see in this video when Dustin goes to hit the pad, right, you can knock the dust out, because pad loading is one of the main causes for bowling sanding pads to lose their effectiveness. So one of the benefits of the TruCut pad is you can bang it on something hard and clean it, which is awesome in terms of being able to grit, and in terms of being able to get it to hold up longer. And it's going to last you about 10 to 12 times dry, and a little bit more, 15 to 18 times if you use it wet. But ultimately, the grit's going to hold up a lot longer than it would be in conventional pads, and that is one of the main benefits of the TruCut sanding pad. Also, because we're talking about actual surface grit, When you see a manufacturer tell you a bowling ball is finished 500, 1000, 2000, that's a 3-step process for that manufacturer. If you're going to use the TruCut system, you can skip right to that 2000 grit, because the 2000 grit is going to be what it leaves on the ball. So if you had a 500 or a 1000 grit finish there, the 2000 grit from TruCut is going to remove those other underlying grits, which is why you don't need to use them at all and be able to get a good finish, a good consistent 2000 grit finish on your bowling ball. One of the best parts about the TruCut that we find that people tend to like also is that it costs less than competitive pads, and it is available in 5 and 6-inch variety. So you can, if you've got a resurfacing machine that has a 6-inch wheel, you can get the 6-inch version, or like most people in most resurfacing machines, the 5-inch size is perfect and works just well. Anyway, we've also got P5000D, which is a very, very unique pad in the fact that that pad by hand does something different than it does by machine. If you do it by hand, you're going to be able to leave a 4000 grit finish on your bowling ball, like the picture here. If you do it with the machine, ball spinner, resurfacing machine, you'll be able to get a 5000 grit finish or a polished finish like you see in the picture here. Now, to kind of show you that, we're actually going to go over here and I'm going to show you the reason why those pads are very, very different. So here you can see the 500 grit microscopic view versus the P5000D. They're very, very different, and that's because the cutting's different, right? The cutting has to be different in order to be able to get you a different finish, and that is why these pads look different, especially designed for bowling balls. And like I said, the focus was on what did they leave on the bowling ball. This is a quick image, a quick video real quick of a hot cell, which is a conventional urethane ball. And we were actually able to shine that ball, as you can see, using a machine to be able to get that ball from a dull state to a polished state with no polish. So that's just one of the cool things, one of the cool benefits of using the TruCut sanding pads is you can actually polish conventional urethane. And anybody that's polished a conventional urethane knows that that's really hard to do. So at the end of the day, it's a measurable process. It's a repeatable process. Using surface grit allows you to account for the changes in the pads and the materials that are being used. That also was a big deal when it comes to getting the pads to last longer and allowing you to skip grits. And TruCut is the only sanding pad technology that uses surface grit as the way to measure the pads as opposed to the sanding grit. And then the last thing is because we developed these using a ball surface scanner, you don't have to have one. If you want to know what the grit is, grab a TruCut pad, and that's what's going to leave on the surface of your bowling ball. As always, if you have more questions or need more information, make sure you check us out at ctdbowling.com. Ronald Hicklin, CEO from Creating a Difference. Have a great day.